It is fairly obvious that treating different things the same can generate as much inequality as treating the same things differently. A few months ago, I posted a short referring to my experience with non-disabled people using person-first language when referencing disabled people, despite the fact that disabled people have statistically stated that they prefer identity-first language. And the history behind this language is so interesting. It started in the disability rights movement, and I'm pretty sure the biggest study to date, on this subject, specifically for autistic people, found that 87% of us preferred identity first, which is saying, I am an autistic person. It seems like organizations that advocate for disabled people that are more often than not run by people who are not disabled. These organizations usually push the person-first language. They say that you should not call someone disabled. They believe that you should not call someone disabled, but rather you should call them a person with a disability. In their opinion, they think that it takes from someone's humanity if you call them disabled, if you do not put the person first and start off by acknowledging that they're a person, hence the person with a disability. And I have worked at two that were disability related, that claim to advocate for disabled people and the disability community. And at both of these organizations, I, an autistic person, received the same talk each time, saying that you should not call someone disabled, you need to be careful with the language, and you need to call them a person first. You say person with autism, person with a disability, person with blank. And me sitting there, as a disabled person, as an autistic person, hearing this being said to me was so surreal. It was so surreal. I was just like, what? Where are you getting this? Because it's obviously not the community. And yes, disabled people are not a monolith. Autistic people are not a monolith. There are absolutely going to be some of us who say, no, I prefer to be called this. I prefer to identify this way. I don't want to be called disabled. There is a common consensus. There are more of us than there are not that tend to prefer this identity first language, at least in terms of autistic people. And me sitting here, in this position, literally autistic, literally disabled, being told by someone who is not disabled that you should not refer to someone as disabled, because when you do that, you are not recognizing their personhood, you are not recognizing their humanity. But if that's the case, I don't know if they realize it, but they're insinuating that being disabled makes you less of a person. They are insinuating that disability is less human, that disabled people are dehumanized as a result of their disability status. So because of that, you can't acknowledge the disability, because that is what retracts from someone's personhood, and instead you have to say that they are a person with this thing. And as an autistic person, I get so infuriated when I hear this from people who are literally not disabled. And for this reason, especially from my experiences working in the disability space with people who are advocating for the disabled, who are not disabled, I will always be skeptical of non-disabled people who are working in some way for the disabled. I will always be skeptical of that moving forward. What, as a non-disabled person, makes you feel so compelled to go out of your way to help disabled people? And I am not saying we don't need allies. I'm not saying that if you are not disabled, you cannot do anything to improve the lives of disabled people, that you can't still be passionate about it's not true. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But All of this comes from like me being in environments where non-disabled people who claim to want to make disabled people's lives better for whatever reason, yet they aren't actually listening to the community themselves. They're speaking for them. And that's the frustrating part. That is what frustrates me so much more than anything. I literally had an instance where an autistic person was like, I'm autistic, and goes, no, like, don't say that. Like, you're not autistic. Like, you're a man with autism. And it's like, how are you gonna tell me? Like, how are you gonna tell me? Genuinely, like, this gets me so heated, and whatever, I'm passionate, so I'm letting the passion. But like, to see this right before my eyes as an autistic person, how can you claim to care? How can you claim to like have this mission and not even listen to the community that you're claiming to care about so much? Why are you speaking for them without even listening to them? So often the views and perspectives of the people who are part of these organizations, the disabled people themselves, don't agree with the way that things are portrayed and depicted, and I felt so like icky. I felt so sick. And some of the arguments I have heard from non-disabled people include the fact that, oh, you refer to someone this way because you're recognizing their humanity. Like, you should treat them just like they're like everyone else. You should treat them the same. And I just feel like that statement is contradictory in and of itself, because by implying that you should treat disabled people like they are just like everyone else already acknowledges the fact that they aren't. They are not like everyone else. They are different. That's why it's called a disability. That's why we're all here. If disabled people were no different than anyone else, they wouldn't be disabled. Disabilities wouldn't exist. So to say that is just simply untrue. And I feel like there are so many harmful consequences of saying things like that. By insisting that someone in a wheelchair is no different than someone who isn't, by insisting that an autistic person is no different than a neurotypical person, you are diminishing every aspect of their lived existence, including their struggles, including the difficulties that disabled people go through on a daily basis, including the inequalities, including the social and structural barriers that disabled people face. You can't just say that two things are the same when they are so obviously not. I know that they're not, and you know that they're not, and we don't need to pretend that they are. Disabled is not a bad word. Disability is not a bad word, and I don't know why so many people want to dance around it. Yes, I understand that disabled people are extremely marginalized, and even today they are dehumanized like crazy, especially depending on where in the world that you live. But even in the United States, disabled people are some of the most unfortunate in terms of so many things, like access to healthcare, education, income, poverty, like, oh yeah, mental health, let's mention that one. You can't just dance around disability in order to make yourself feel better, in order to make yourself feel like a good person, because you are acknowledging a disabled person as a human. Disability is human. Disabled people are human. We don't need to avoid the very thing that is so obvious and in front of us in order to treat them that way. We can look at a disabled person and see their disability if it's visible, because yeah, a lot of disabilities you can see, a lot of them that you can't, but we can look at them and we can see that, and we can still see them as human. I will say it over and over and over again, like, disabled is not a bad word. And it is so frustrating to me because it's majority people who are non-disabled that push these narratives out into the public, and they speak for disabled people, they speak over disabled people, and their message is the one that's ultimately heard. And it's just wrong. You don't get brownie points for treating a disabled person like a human being. You don't get brownie points for that. That should be a given. And yes, I understand that it's not in many instances. One could argue that it doesn't matter, but the truth is it does matter. Language does matter, semantics matter, the way that we talk about things matters. Non-disabled people are speaking for the disabled, or they are claiming to want to help them, but they are not listening to them, and they are speaking for them. And they're doing this all in the name of recognizing them as equals and, you know, saying that they're no different than us when you know damn well that we are. And you know damn well that they are. And by doing that and by denying that, denying us of that difference, failing to actually recognize the struggles that we live through, which you would never understand because you don't live them. You can only look at them from the outside and try to have compassion, but you don't know what it's like, and you'll never know what it's like. And no matter how much of a good person it makes you feel like you are, to speak over a population that you claim to want to support, like, it doesn't make you a good person. It doesn't make you a good person. If you want to help disabled people, listen to them. Actually listen to them. Listen to their opinions. Listen to their lived experiences, and don't deny them of their differences, because that causes so much more harm than good. So much more harm. And then when we do come out, we're told by people who will never know what it's like to be us, that we are the same, that we are no different. I remember sitting there at this organization and hearing this talk for the second time, knowing that I'm autistic and knowing the impact that has had on my whole entire life and the way that it shapes everything in my world, and listening to this person give me this speech about not calling someone autistic, not calling someone disabled, because it's dehumanizing. Disability is human. Autistic people are human. And if you saw that and if you believed that, you would have no problem calling autistic people autistic, especially when they are asking to be called autistic. It was always the funniest thing in the world to me. Like, even grammatically speaking, like, if we are, like, the English language, to say someone is an autistic person is grammatically correct. Like, I'm pretty sure if it is like a state that can change, for example, depression is something that may not be permanent, for example, so you are a person with depression, because that is a state that can change or can shift or flow. But autism is not. That will never change. That will never go away. You are born autistic, you will die autistic. You are an autistic person. Like, that is not going to change. That is not a state that can move or change, or you're not going to wake up tomorrow and not be autistic anymore. And person with autism was always so funny to me, because it's like, I can't just like wake up and decide to leave it at the door. Like, it's not an accessory. It's not like a purse or like a little outfit and I can just like put it down when I don't want it anymore. Like, this is my brain. It's my brain, and my brain is my whole entire life. It is my whole entire life. Without my brain, I'm dead. And yes, my brain is different than a neurotypical brain. And to deny that, and to deny the voices of disabled people and having a say in any of the narratives that are crafted around their existences, is just so wrong. It's just so wrong. All I can say is that if you want to help disabled people, if you want to help anyone, but if you want to help disabled people, if you want to help autistic people, if you care about anything to do with disability rights, disability justice, whatever, if you want to help them, listen to them. Do not ever speak for a population that you are not a part of. Like, genuinely, like, this makes me so emotional. Like, don't do that. And who am I? I'm just one random person sitting here on my floor. Like, I'm one autistic person out of many autistic people in the world, so whatever, take my opinion with a grain of salt, but this is just my opinion, and I'm very passionate about this, and I apply this to myself as well, and I try to hold myself to it. Don't ever speak for someone that you will not ever have the capacity to truly understand, and don't ever put your voice above theirs, especially if you claim to want to help them, or if you claim to care about the community or the experiences of this group. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't think that you know what it's like to be disabled because you're around disabled people all the time. It doesn't matter how passionate you are about a cause or or how many disabled people you know or are friends with. Like, you will never, ever, ever know what it's like. Yeah, so I guess I learned that lesson the hard way, and I will not be involving myself in any disability organizations that are not actually operated and ran by disabled people themselves. I guess that seemed pretty obvious, but yeah. Support organizations like AANE, the Association for Autism and Neurodiversity, I think. Autism, Neurodiversity. Yeah, AANE, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network. Now my mind is blanking. But yeah, those are, for example, organizations that actually involve autistic people in all of the work that they do or are ran entirely by autistic people. End of rant. I'm gonna go like, I can't touch grass, it's dark outside. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I need to like ground myself and bring myself back to earth. And yeah, it felt really good to get all of this out. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna front about that. But my energy is gone, so goodbye.